Welcome to the Legal Talk Part 2, Sexting and Texting, this crime where consent doesn't matter. In today's eye-opening episode, we're going to uncover the harsh realities of sexting and the legal minefield our teens navigate every time they open their phone, connect to Wi-Fi, or use any kind of technology. As much as we may think we know the dangers, technology is outpacing our efforts. During this crucial conversation, we're talking everything from heartbreaking real-life examples to invaluable advice, making this episode a must-listen for every parent who wants to ensure their child's life isn't permanently derailed before it even really begins. This is a lot more than just a safety discussion. We're talking about how to take action now to safeguard your loved ones and their future. Welcome to the Cook Who Can't Eat podcast, where chronic illness and family meet at home and in the kitchen. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad that you're here. Teaching our kids about the basic laws that govern us all, like speed limits and drinking age, smoking age, city curfews. Those are fairly straightforward and easy to explain. Definitely easier than trying to explain the legalities around sexting or intimate relationships with or between minors. In part 1, we talked about some of those basic laws and regulations that your kids need to know and how one wrong decision can have some really big consequences. Now in part 2, we're going to talk about something incredibly important. Sexting, a sex crime where consent does not matter. Yes, you heard me right. Sexting is a sex crime where consent does not matter. We didn't grow up with sexting. Our parents never had to sit us down and have this conversation. At no point did we open our phone or a text message or an email to an unwanted dick pic. These technologies just weren't around. So as we're trying to figure this all out and learn that this is the environment and the world our kids are growing up in, it's our own lack of information and experience and knowledge that brings us to a point where we've got 7-year-olds being tried and convicted as sexual predators and placed on the sex offender registry for life. Or how 11-year-olds are being prosecuted as an offender while also being the named victim in another teen's prosecution. I share these stories and laws and statistics not to bore you or bog you down with information, not even to make the episode longer. I share them because as parents, we need to understand the legal landscape that we are raising our kids in. Teens and tweens know it all, and they are indestructible. Just ask them. So to really cut through the noise and get them to understand, pay attention, and retain a lot of this information, we found the best way to do that was to share information, but also share real-life stories and throw in a couple shocking statistics. Sexting is a common term. We've all heard it. Legally, it's defined as the creating, sending, receiving, saving, or forwarding of any sexually explicit material between 2 or more individuals. When adults partake, it's perfectly legal. But when anyone in the process is under the age of 18, it is both a federal and a state crime. The laws were first created to fight child pornography. The goal was preventing the exploitation of these sexually abused minors. But when those laws were created, computers, cell phones, and social media wasn't part of our life. Now, 88% of kids under the age of 17 have a smartphone. 62% of young millennials and Gen Zers admit to sending a sext at least once a month. 48% say they send one at least once a week. And 63% of that same audience says that the reason they send it is to appear funny or flirtatious. In a 2021 study by Common Sense Media, they actually found that 15% of all people who receive a sext forward it without permission. It's crazy, but it happens all the time. Philip Albert and his girlfriend had a huge fight one night. In anger, Philip got out of bed and decided to send a couple very intimate photographs of his girlfriend to everyone in his contact list and hers. A couple days later, Philip showed up at home to the police executing a search warrant, and upon arrival, he was placed under arrest for child pornography charges. Although he didn't take the pictures and he received them when he was 17, their big fight and his decision to share the photos happened after his 18th birthday. All in all, he faced 72 charges of sexual misconduct and child pornography. Eventually, he pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal to avoid prison and instead was sentenced to 5 years probation and 20 years on the sex offender registry. He'll be 43 before he can even apply to be released for the registry, and it's not a guarantee. The one angry minute it took for him to send those emails changed his life dramatically. Every state has child pornography and exploitation laws that are now being applied to every part of sexting. A teenager who sends a sext to another teenager will face the same consequences as a grown adult who has had inappropriate personal contact with a minor. The predator, whether they're a minor or an adult, can actually be tried by both state and federal courts. They face prison sentences that have increased in length by more than 500% over the last 15 years, hefty fines, and placement on the sex offender registry, potentially for life. In Florida, a 16-year-old girl and her 17-year-old boyfriend decided to photograph their intimate evening. It was clearly consensual, and the images were never seen by anyone else. However, both teens faced child pornography charges after transferring the images from their phone to their home computer. They appealed their convictions, but it was denied. In the court's decision, they stated that they had the responsibility to protect children from exploitation, even if it comes from their own immature judgment. It's that same immature judgment that created the opportunity for a man in Florida to catfish several teen boys through Facebook and convince them to send her sexual images of themselves. He then used those pictures to extort the teens for money, introduction to other minors, even favors. When the blackmailer was eventually caught, he was charged for numerous crimes. While the boys were all his victims, they also faced child pornography charges for taking and sending the offending images. When sexual images of a minor are sent to anyone, even if it's someone their own age, it is considered child pornography, which is a sex crime. No state considers this sex crime to be a misdemeanor, and they almost never take into consideration whether or not the minor consented. In other words, teens, whether they are a willing participant or not, they can be considered both the victim and perpetrator. Can you imagine how painful that would be? A few years ago, a 16-year-old sent her 17-year-old boyfriend a few naked pictures of herself with his promise to never show anyone, ever. 2 hours later, the boyfriend sent all the images to his best friend, who also promised to never share them with anyone. 8 days later, the girlfriend came to school and found one of her naked pictures taped to her locker and in 10 different places throughout her school. The 16-year-old was so humiliated she dropped out of school. While she was the victim in this case, she was also considered an offender, and she was convicted of creating and distributing child pornography. The boyfriend and the best friend were both convicted of sexual exploitation of a child, possession of child pornography, and distribution of child pornography. Each served jail time and had to register as a sex offender until the age of 26. There is an emotional element to consider when sexting, even when it's consensual. When someone, especially a minor, sends an explicit image of themselves, that act alone can create huge feelings of fear, shame, vulnerability. Once a picture's sent, even if it's just someone they really, really trust, there is no way to take it back or control who sees it. That is scary, especially when you consider that we all live with an internet that never forgets. When unintended viewers see these vulnerable and intimate images, the emotional and psychological trauma can and has led to homicide, physical assault, and in tragic cases like Jessica Logan in Ohio or Hope Whitzel from Florida, the bullying and the embarrassment from their exposed sexting led them to take their own life. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children found that 25% of children identified as the victim of online pornography originally and willingly sent the images to someone themselves. Well, it's estimated that 5% of all teens are victims of sextortion at some point. Only 1 out of 3 will tell their parents, and less than 8% of those that tell their parents will tell the police. One picture, one text, one whatever sent is not worth a lifetime on a registry or prison time. Between a teen's belief that they are invincible and all the hormones and noise that they live with, in order to cut through all that and make sure that they remember these things, we obviously shared the information, we shared stories, but when it comes down to it, these are the 5 things I tend to repeat to them a lot. Number 1, never text, email, write, or send a photograph of something you would not want to be seen on the front page of every newspaper and website in the world. Number 2, a teen's body is still growing and developing. Let that happen. After they turn 18, if they want sexy or intimate images, schedule a boudoir photo shoot. Number 3, if you've taken pictures like this of yourself, delete them. If you've sent these pictures, you need to get the parents involved right away. If you've received pictures, you need to get parents and police involved right away. And no matter what you do, do not ever forward them. It takes less than a minute to take and send one of these pictures. It takes mere seconds to forward it, but the punishment takes a lifetime. Number 4, it is your body. However, as a minor, if you're taking, distributing, or even having pictures on your own phone, that is a sex crime. And punishments do not take into consideration your age, your consent, or your intention. These laws are here to protect minors from being exploited by people who wish to harm, abuse, or even enslave them. However, these laws also apply to minors. Number 5, it does not matter what you've done, when or how. As parents, we are your safe place, and you will never, ever have to fight any of this alone. There's a lot of gray area when you're talking about sexting, especially if you're looking at the legal side of it. This is why teen convictions vary so drastically. Each state has their own set of laws that establish age of consent, restrictions on age difference, and what consequences offenders will face for sexting or sexual intercourse with or between minors. If you discover that your kid has already been sexting, the how could you conversation is not going to be very helpful or successful right now. Instead, focus on contacting local law enforcement. Have your kid make a list of everyone and every time images were sent or shared. The only option here is to try and control the spread of the image. It's not going to be 100% successful. It's not going to be easy, but it's worth trying. What they really need to know, what they really want to know, is that you're going to be there for them. You've still got their back, and that you're going to do anything and everything you can to keep them safe, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Thank you for being here, my friend. I know this can feel like a heavy subject, but more than ever before, we need to talk about this because technology is outpacing us at every turn. Next week is part 3 of the legal talk, intimacy. Don't let high school romance turn into a lifelong registry. We will take a closer look at high school romances, teen love, and the consequences that most kids don't think about. Join me on social for extra content, recipes, podcast sneak peeks, and more. Don't forget to subscribe so you know as soon as the next episode is available. In the meantime, take care of yourself, my friend. I'll see you next week. Accessibility matters, so every podcast episode is available on your favorite platform and as a video with captions on YouTube.